and welcome to Hillside at Home. This is a new series in which I'm going to video call Hillsiders and ask them one simple question. And that is, what is God teaching you, telling you, showing you in this time? My hope is that this will allow Hillsiders to encourage each other and also give those of you watching some faces to see, some people to hear from other than Louie, Chris, and myself. So without further ado, let's get into the first episode of Hillside at Home. Hello, and welcome to Hillside at Home. And today we're talking with the Toft family. So we're so excited to have them. So we'll just kick it off and just say, Toft family, what is something that God is teaching you or telling you or showing you during this time?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I think this is a great idea. It's really cool to be able to share this stuff with the church and watch each other and see what God's been teaching us. I'll start things off. We each have something we wanted to share, but for me personally, this is from a few days ago. I woke up from a dream that had me kind of anxious. I had like kind of a weird feeling, and I was like, I need to spend the morning in prayer about this and kind of consider it. So I was cracking open the Bible and reading from where I had last left off, which happened to be Hebrews 9. And in that chapter, the author just kind of briefly, almost as a side note, describes the Ark of the Covenant, and specifically mentions the items that are inside of it, that were held inside of the Ark, or travel along with it. And it was an urn that had manna in it, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments. And I kind of paused because I was like, I've read at times that those were items in it, but I never really thought about it, like why those items, and it seems kind of random, just random stuff from their history. So I decided to think about that a little bit more, and I realized that they were really important symbols of aspects of God's people's relationship with Him. Yeah. The manna, of course, being God's provision, or more specifically for me, the lesson is trusting God, because they could only gather enough manna for that day, and then they had to trust that God was going to provide for the next day, right? And so that's what that symbolized for me. And then Aaron's staff budding, I remember the story, but didn't really understand the context. So I looked it up in Numbers, and it was a miracle that had happened actually in response to a rebellion from the Israelites while wandering in the desert, about how God had chosen to choose rulers for them. And God's response to that rebellion was to have all the rulers of this rebellion, along with Aaron, who was the priest at the time, the high priest, put their staffs before the altar of the most holy place. And overnight, Aaron's staff had budded, and not just buds on it, but the full flowers had grown, and complete almonds had come out of those flowers overnight from a dead stick. And I was just really struck by that imagery of God bringing life from death, and that was His answer to a rebellion of His people. So not just a powerful image, but also kind of a powerful symbol of that God's answer to our rebellion is redemption, is new life, and how beautiful that is. And then, of course, the 10 Commandments being His law and order, and the way that we're to conduct ourselves. So I just really liked that. For me, I almost teared up a little bit when I was reading the staff coming back to life, because I was like, man, what a powerful and beautiful thing for Him to respond to our rebellion with new life. And then also the idea that the Israelites carried that around with them as a reminder of who God is and what their relationship with Him is like. So that was just good for me, a good perspective, just to remember who God is, and that my the things I'm worried about, my anxieties, really do kind of pale in comparison to who God is. So it just kind of realigned me to humility before God, and gratefulness for the things that He provides.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the tablets are in there too.
Yeah, which I mentioned, the law and order. Were the tablets.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I love I'm actually that idea of like life versus death and life from death. I'm actually this month have a set to memorize Romans 8, the whole chapter. I'm adding to it little by little. Wow. And for the beginning, it's just talking about like going after the flesh is death, but like the spirit brings, like walking in the spirit brings life, and that whole idea of death and life. So that's cool.
That's cool. Arla, do you want to say what you learned today at Family Church?
No.
Okay.
The story we read about Jesus, do you remember what happened?
It's your turn if you want to share.
You don't have to, though.
No? Okay, do you want to go watch your movie now?
That's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just go press play.
Laurel, did you have anything that you wanted to share or add?
Yeah, well, as usual, we joke because Ronnie approaches things intellect first and I approach things emotion first. So I'll share my emotion first side of what God's been teaching me. Although Death from Life, I love that. That is kind of my jam, but we don't have enough time to talk all about that right now. So another time we'll talk about that. So for me, this past couple of weeks have actually been full of severe anxiety because of the whole virus and everything. And it's situational anxiety, I would say, but it's been very intense and like pretty debilitating for me. I think I tend to be a worrier in general. It makes me a really good physician, but it's not great in real life when it can really sort of paralyze you. Because whereas in my job as a doctor, being able to worry about what's going to happen and plan for everything puts me into a place of action. In my regular life, worrying and anxiety paralyzes me. And I think in this particular instance, well, I should say my caveat before I tell you about how God is addressing my anxiety is listen to professionals and don't discount everything as like, oh, it's just worry and anxiety, so it's fine. But I think in this instance for me, my natural tendency to be a worrier combined with the fact that this is my field and this is something that I know a lot about. We were joking last night, I'm like, science is making me worry. But someone once said that anxiety is just imagination gone wrong. And my imagination is very capable. And in this instance, as I'm reading about what's happening and sort of tracking what was going on overseas before it came to the US, it's not just a thought, it's not just something that's out there, it's very real. I have images and experiences and faces and personal stories of being in the intensive care unit. That's the type of doctor that I am, caring for these people. So I literally know what it's like to see somebody die on a ventilator. But that understanding was becoming a barrier for me because I couldn't really get past that degree of my own understanding, which is pretty extensive in this case. And, you know, Ronnie was talking me down like, you're not going to die on a ventilator, but that was literally where my anxiety was taking me in this circumstance, especially as, you know, a healthcare worker. But two verses that I spent a lot of time kind of talking to God and trying to get to the bottom of where is all of this anxiety coming from. And the first verse is in Psalms when he says, when my anxious thoughts multiply within me, your consolations delight my soul. And I definitely was feeling the anxious thoughts multiplying within me, but then letting God's consolations delight my soul. And I had this night where I was listening to a worship song that's just basically laying out the gospel. It's just talking about Jesus from birth to death. And there was something about remembering the power of the gospel and remembering how big God is and how he is bigger than all of these things and how that ultimate redemption of life from death is bigger than any of the anxieties we face, however realistic or unrealistic they might be. And the writer of that song had said that theology leads to praise, because when we know what's true about God, it allows us to praise him for who he is. And so I think that's what delighted my soul in the midst of these anxious thoughts, was just remembering that, you know, Jesus left his throne of endless glory for a cradle in the dirt to come and be with me and to redeem me. Ooh, see, here's the emotion. And that there's another line in that song that says, this gospel truth of old shall not kneel and it shall not fade. And just remembering how powerful the gospel is, and it is big enough and bigger than anything that we face and than any of our anxieties and where they take us. And the other verse is in Philippians, which will be familiar to people where we're invited to, bring all of the things that we're worrying about before God by prayer and petition, make our requests known. And then Paul writes, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And then there's that beautiful verse after, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is lovely, if anything is praiseworthy or excellent, think on such things, and the God of peace will be with you. And that verse has two meanings for me. I think my initial thought is always peace that passes understanding means supernatural peace. So I don't understand why I have peace, but I have it. And that certainly can happen, and miraculously God can impart his peace to us. But a slight nuance that in this situation for me is particularly powerful is it's a peace that surpasses or moves beyond my own understanding. So my own understanding can get me quite far when it comes to a medical crisis. But I was getting stuck there, and I couldn't go past my own understanding. But God's peace takes me beyond my understanding to that next spot where, yes, I understand a lot. And, I'm almost accustomed to in the ICU being able to predict the future because I know what the course of illness is like for my patients. But that, again, coming back to humility before God, recognizing my understanding only takes me so far, and the peace of God can get me beyond that understanding. And that's where the peace lies, is past the point where I can take my mind and my imagination. And then the second half of that, which is instructing us of what kinds of things to dwell on. So for my own personal health, I had to stop reading things. I had to stop reading about young healthcare workers dying because that was really not helping. That was not something excellent or praiseworthy to dwell on. And so I had to have discipline of I can't be on social media because all my friends are medical people who are saying things that make my anxiety worse. So I'm having self-control to not dwell on those things and to not even let them enter into my day. I get what I need for my job, and that's it. And then to choose to dwell on other things. And that is helping a lot with it was pretty severe anxiety. That was it.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. That was awesome. I've never heard that presented that way, is the understanding piece. That was cool. And then, yeah, it's so true. What we fill our minds with, right? It totally affects how we live. And so for a lot of people, I'm hearing, shutting off some of the noise and like being informed enough, to know, but don't just keep on bringing it in. Yeah. So, well, that's great. Thank you guys so much for taking a few minutes to do this. I'm really excited about this kind of video series, and I really hope that people enjoy it and hop on board. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Happy to do it. Also, our lighting was great, so that works for us.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day and getting some good family time there in your quarantine.
Yeah, we look forward to whenever the time is that the whole Hillside family gets to get back together again.
Yeah, absolutely.